I think you recommended this. You recommended this book several times. So
actually, that was one of the first books in that field, and then there are many other came after. But now it becomes like something that you can get a degree in or study, which is the study of what makes a country prosper and thrive, or a nation or group of people or community, and what makes them decline. Very important field. Unfortunately, in most Muslim world is unheard of. I mean, people are not even aware of these books, never mind just to read them or study them. And we are still having those very shallow and superficial explanation of what's going on, denial, justification, conspiracy, blaming it on others, all kinds of approaches that will lead nowhere. They have they're not going to change anything, because there are this become a science now. There are factors that makes a nation or community or country thrive and prosper, and there are factors that and these factors are not biased toward Muslims. They're not going to favor Muslims or favor anybody. Whoever takes those conditions seriously, they will reap the fruits, and whoever doesn't, then they only have themselves to blame.
No. Well, this is, inshallah, maybe we'll have discussion on this book and maybe related to Dr. Bashir's book, maybe in the near future. But for today, the subject, or there is some questions about what level of Iman or Islam we should go to. So I remember when I invited several brothers last Sunday lecture to discuss the book of Dr. Bashir, some of them answered with like, I'm busy doing something, shopping or something. So for them, Islam is enough if I do the 5 prayers a day. Others, they go further if they have maybe long dress when they go to the masjid, long beard. Others will go with like, okay, I memorize Quran and I go to reciting of the Quran every week. And that's the major thing or the maximum thing I can do. Civilization, thinking, mission, understanding better for Islam or tadabbur is not in my radar at this time. So what's the level of Islam? I mean, sometimes we use a hadith like the Arabi, the Bedouin who came to Rasulullah, and he asked him, what should I do? He told him, you can do salah, siyam, zakah, hajj, and you can do more. But the Arabi said, no, that's enough for me. So they took this hadith and Rasulullah told him, aflaha in sadaq, and if you do this, you will be successful. If you, take them. So lots of Muslims took this literally. I can do the 5 prayers, I can go to the masjid, and I can memorize Quran, and I can look at, the recitation of the Quran, ilm al-tajweed. And if somebody make a mistake in mad or something, that would be a great deal to me. But I did not go beyond that. I mean, tadabbur, where is the ayat that's muhkamat, what's the major message of Islam? That's not important to me. I'm fine with just memorizing Quran or listening to mawa'id or something, but deeper than that, that's not my subject. So I would leave this for you, inshallah, and after that, maybe would like to hear the response from our brothers on the session here. We have Dr. Qazi. He's joining us the first time, and he, mashallah, wrote a lot of research, and he's interested in a lot of Islamic researches. He is in the Hanafi, but in the Hanafi, that's maybe not the Hanafi we know today, the Hanafi that's rigid. No, he's the Hanafi that's maybe original Abu Hanifa. Okay, I will leave the mic for Dr. Suhail. Assalamu alaikum.
Well, brother, you touched upon a subject that is very, very broad, very deep, very unfortunate, very sad. Um, it can be really tackled from many angles. In my humble opinion, I came long time ago, I came to the conclusion that the versions of Islam that are prevalent today, all of them, almost, with no exceptions, the traditional, the political Islam, the Salafi, the activism, all of it, has little to do with the original Islam that was preached by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They look the same on the surface, but if you go deeper, there is a huge difference. The main difference, maybe out of many, is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ presented Islam in the beginning, and this is from the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he did not introduce those rituals first so that we don't commit this mistake, to reduce Islam to a list of worship acts to do or list of things forbidden to avoid. This came later in Medina, not in Mecca, so that Muslims do not commit this very mistake that we ended up committing, unfortunately, which is that Islam is not a short list of tasks to do and short list of tasks to avoid. Islam is a full dedication to Allah and to a mission and to the ultimate purposes. Full dedication and commitment to dedicate yourself and your life to Allah and to the divine mission, to meet the expectations, to know them first, to know those expectations and to meet those expectations, to fulfill the purpose of Allah or the ultimate purposes of the deen. The Prophet ﷺ for 13 years did not do anything other than that, other than solidifying that commitment, getting that commitment from the companions that yes, I'm going to stop living for myself and I'm going to dedicate myself and my life to Allah, and I'm going to do that whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, that includes even if it's going to include, if going to involve to put my life on the line, my money, etc. And that's the meaning of jahadu fi sabilillahi bi amwalihim wa anfusihim. They strive. Jihad, unfortunately, we always have now to clarify, it has nothing to do with fighting or with violence. Jihad means doing your utmost fi sabilillah, meaning to fulfill the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's how Islam was presented. It's a life mission that you embrace, and you become someone who's a mission driven, and your job is to understand, and that requires a lot of learning, and to implement, and that requires a lot of action, a lot of efforts, the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore you embark on a journey of the pursuit. Quran beautifully called it ittiba'u ridwanillah. You embark on a journey to pursue the good pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Keep always understanding your mission, understanding the expectation, better understanding your mission, better understanding your expectation, better understanding the ultimate purposes of Islam and the purpose of Allah, better understanding your reality, that you were assigned to change it and to reform it and to improve. So there is so much to learn and so much to do. Now that's Islam, the original Islam. And then came the rituals, the ibadat and the fiqh, which now we define Islam as worship acts and as halal and haram. This came later for those mission-driven people to help them focusing on their mission. So the ibadat, the worship acts, are meant to maintain that commitment, to refresh that commitment, to reinforce that commitment and strengthen it. And then the muharramat, things that were forbidden, are meant so that to eliminate any distraction, because anything that Allah has forbidden will basically exhaust your energy and will distract you from your mission. So things were forbidden because they are harmful to you and to the society, and things were prescribed so that they can support you in fulfilling that mission. This is the Islamic paradigm, the original Islamic paradigm: Tawheed, mission, and maqasid, or ultimate purposes. What happened later on is this heart of Islam was removed, and it was removed partially of lack of understanding, but partially by design. Because when we shifted from the Khilafah Rashida, from leadership by consent and consultation and transparency and accountability, into the dynasty rule, one man show or one family ruling, it's not in their best interest for this kind of Islam to continue. So they start marginalizing this heart of Islam and this essence of Islam and sponsoring the fiqh. Go and study and publish books about how to make wudu, how to make ghusl, how to do this, how fiqh tahara, fiqh salah, and that's why you can see disproportionate number of books on these subjects in the Islamic literatures, and very few books on the mission of Islam or on the maqasid of Islam, etc. That's the political reason. And then we have the other turning point, unfortunately, that Muslims at certain point in time, they were concerned, they were happy with the fiqh they have, with the literature they have. We have Malik and Shafi'i and Shafi'i and Ibn Hanbal and Abu Hanifa. So we're good. So we have enough, and we don't need more fiqh. So in order to avoid the risk of bid'ah sneaking into our religion, let's freeze ijtihad. No more. We don't need it. The great scholars have addressed almost every issue, so we don't need any more ijtihad. And that's confirmed or reinforced the intellectual stagnation. So we had political oppression and suppressed freedom and therefore creativity, and we have this intellectual stagnation by design. So we ended up for centuries relying on books and fiqh and ijtihad that was made in a very different circumstances, and with Islam that was stripped from the sense of mission, from the maqasid. So we left with those bits and pieces, and therefore the Islam that we inherited, I mean, I don't blame those who told you that they are busy, etc., because the Islam we inherited says that created a few categories. There is one category of people who think that just because they were born Muslims, they're fine. They don't have anything to do. And by the way, this is probably the majority of Muslims in America and in the Muslim world. They are not practicing Muslim yet. And if you count how many practicing Muslim, the percentage of practicing Muslim is not the majority. So there are large segment of people who were told that it's a very similar to the distorted Christianity, understanding of Christianity, that Allah is Ghafur Rahim. Just the difference is that Jesus took care of your sins, and here Allah will forgive your sins, so don't worry. Yeah, you're good. You're born to Muslim parents and etc., so you're good. And if your heart is good heart, then you're good. You hear this all the time, unfortunately, in Muslim society. Then you have another category of people that you mentioned who limit themselves to the fara'id, the must deeds, and avoiding the kaba'ir, the major sins. And even in these, they also gave themselves the freedom to shorten the list. So in the major sins, you don't find lying, for example. Lying is okay. That's why people are not honest. Majority of people, unfortunately, in Muslim society are not honest. They don't have work values, work ethics. They can cheat, all kinds of cheating. But maybe alcohol mainly, and maybe adultery or fornication. These two, and you have prayer and fasting, and that's it. Zakat if you qualify, and Hajj if you become very old and you have nothing better to do and you have a lot of money, then you go and perform Hajj. That's the version of Islam that was transmitted from one generation to another. That's why people have no incentive to learn, because they think they know it already. And they have no incentive to push themselves because they think they are doing what they're supposed to do. And it's very reasonable, very logical. If you think you know all what you need to know about your religion, and you're doing everything that you need to do, then what incentive is left for you to learn or to do more? That's it. You become very complacent, content, you are happy and satisfied with what you're doing and thinking that you're doing your best. So this Islam, what I call it sometimes the Islam on the side. You know, sometimes you order a salad and you tell them the dressing, keep it on the side. So that's the Islam. It's a dressing on the side. It doesn't mix with your life. It's things that you do on the side, but you are the same person like the one who's not practicing like everybody else. But you're doing these extra few things extra. And then if you go, and that's a pyramid. As you go to the next level, you find smaller and smaller segment. If you go to the next level, you find the Muslim who applies Islam as a way of life, and they have serious concern with this definition. Because when Islam is defined as a way of life, it means that if you apply it in your life, then you're fine. That's why I prefer defining Islam as a life mission. Those who define Islam as a way of life, the next category, will do what? These are people who basically they are careful not to do anything haram. And if they are about to make any decision, they try to consult whether it is okay or not, if they're going to start a business. So they are applying Islam. They are applying that fiqh, that halal and haram, not only doing the rituals or the minimum, but also they're applying it in their life. So that's also another category. On top of that, and that's the end of it. And none of them, by the way, come close to the category that the Prophet ﷺ was nurturing in Mecca. None of these. Then comes the end, the top of the pyramid, is the Muslim activists. Now, these people, not only they apply Islam in their life, but also they give some of their time or their money to activities. They participate in volunteering in the mosque, Muslim organizations here and there, but on convenience basis. I mean, whenever they have time, there is no commitment. It just extra work, and that's good. And these Muslim activists, currently, they are the top of the pyramid. Whether they are active on their own or they're active part of a group or part of an organization, they belong somewhere, it doesn't matter. It's just Muslim activists. Of course, I'm not mentioning those who are deviating, those who are doing terrible things in the name of Islam. I'm talking about the people who are okay in the pyramid. So that mission-driven Muslim who has a cause and has purpose and dedicated themselves to learn and to understand the purpose and the plan of Allah and to fulfill it to the best of their ability, it's almost non-existent. Does not exist today. And that's exactly the Muslim that the Prophet was working on in Mecca, working to get that mission-driven Muslim who dedicate themselves, which means that at no point in their life they will have that feeling that they know enough or they're doing enough. At no point in their lives. They are in a journey, until they meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are working on themselves to be better people, working with their knowledge to learn more and implement what they learn, and working to make this world a better place. Because if you think about it, yes, we can spend a lot of time discussing the mission of Islam, but there are some key words that Quran uses that summarizes or encapsulates the mission of Islam. Islah, making people, helping people to become better people, and contributing to the greater good, or to make this world a better place. Tazkiyah, work on yourself to be a better person and help others becoming better people. That's the job of the Prophet. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ يعلمهم الكتاب يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. So helping people by sharing your knowledge, sharing your advice, by example, uplifting people, mentoring or uplifting people while you're working on yourself, and learning and sharing that knowledge, and teaching. I call this like square. If you want to be like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's what he was doing. You work on yourself to be a role model for the people around you, and you help people becoming better people through tazkiyah. And you learn, educate yourself and learn, and you teach. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Teach them the book and wisdom. And he said, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that the best amongst you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it. And of course, any useful knowledge that apply, because hikmah, wisdom, is very broad word. Anything that is useful for people in this life or in the hereafter can come under wisdom. So that's what need to be revived, is how we turn the pyramid upside down. We need to present Islam and as an invitation for people to dedicate themselves to Allah and to his mission and to his purpose, and then start that journey that does not end, of learning and learning more and doing more, and committing themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for full commitment. udkhulu fi silmi kaffa. Enter in this wholeheartedly. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ. Dedicate themselves to ابتغاء رضوان الله, in the pursuit of the good pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will conclude by the verse that I keep using, that established the contrast between the true Islam that was preached by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the current versions of Islam, that most of them, they can fall under Islam al-Arab. In Surah Al-Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَمُنُّونَ عَلَيْكُمْ قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And then the next verse define who are the true believers. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا. Their faith reached the level of certainty. To answer your question, what kind of faith? You keep working on that faith, on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which I said in khutbah before this 1 week ago. I said the relationship with Allah is multidimensional and requires work, requires cultivation. There is love, there is gratitude, there is reverence, there is fear, there is hope, there is dependence. It's a multidimensional relationship. And each dimension needs to be cultivated. You need to work on, so that you reach that level of certainty, of iman that goes from acceptance into certainty. And when they reach that level, that translates into وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And then the verse concludes by saying, these are the true believers. أُولَٰئِكُمْ الصَّادِقُونَ. These are the ones who are true to their religion. If Dr. Safi can translate the verses, the two verses in Surah Al-Hujurat, go ahead, please.
Actually, Dr. Suhail, I want to do a little bit of background why we are discussing this at this time. Basically, because I think that you are a mission-driven man, and I can summarize what I heard from you so far in the last many months that I listened to you, that you are trying to transform average Muslims from, I'm sorry to use the term, mediocre people living on the side, not getting involved neither in the transformation of their ummah, nor in the transformation of their smaller community, not even in the transformation of their families, because one who doesn't have it can't give it. You are trying to give content to the Islam of every Muslim by urging them to be mission-driven people. And unfortunately, or fortunately, when you can see, it's very hard to describe the word to people who cannot see. I'm sorry to say that we are in a situation where we maybe we all need to go through certain operations in order to be able to look around and see the world around us. For some reason, some people live in the United States for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and they still carry the old values on their back and don't learn anything from the freedom that exists here that they can benefit from. I mentioned before that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this taklif of people to people who are free people. Cannot, if you're oppressed, if you don't have the freedom, you cannot have a mission and go about implementing that mission. You have to be a free person. And we have an opportunity to do this here. So I suggested to you last time, to everybody, to listen to that khutbah, although it is available online, by the way. And to few days ago khutbah, last Friday's khutbah, which Dr. Suhail talked about this time. As a matter of fact, I listened to it very attentively, and I can summarize it that it's focused around the meaning of Iman and knowledge and love of God, not fear of God, and how this will transform a Muslim who has this knowledge, who has the faith first, then acquire the knowledge, then learn to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without fear, because he deserves to be loved. How that Muslim will strive to be the best he can be, using his words, the best he can be, and to be beneficial. Dr. Suhail used the word a mercy to the people who lives around him. I'm using hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, الخلق كلهم عيال الله أن أقربهم إليه أنفعهم لعياله. All people are children of God. The most beneficial, the closer to him are the most beneficial to others. So this is the theme that I've heard from Dr. Suhail for several khutbah, but specifically in last Friday, the Friday before and last Friday. And I think this draw a map for us, for every Muslim, how to move from this traditional inherited Islam that's based on ritual into an active dynamic Islam where a Muslim has to interact with the world around him and with his community and with his family and try to be a better human being for himself and for everybody around him. Remember, your children need modeling. If you don't model what a good Muslim is, they think whatever you're doing is what a good Muslim will be. So if they only see you praying, but at the same time you come in late to your appointment, not respecting your commitment to other and your contracts, then they'll start doing the same thing. And they think that's okay. And that's Islam. Well, it's not. Dr. Suhail is telling us, based on his understanding of the Quran and the Hadith, that this is not. And we need to change. He is attributing this traditional Islam to the state of backwardness that Dr. Bashir talked about. And he's drawing a map for how to move out, how to climb out of the hole we've been stuck in for several centuries, and move to the ground, to see the sun, to prosper, to enjoy this earth that Allah entrusted to us. Right now, let me tell you, I spent this morning, I read one comment from a man whom I respect very much. He's talking about Khwarizmi and the logarithm that artificial intelligence today is depending on. And again, asking us all to read Al-Fatiha for Imam Al-Khwarizmi, who was the head of School of Hikmah in Baghdad. Baghdad, that was the capital of knowledge on this earth. Well, again, alhamdulillah, I don't mind at all, not only reading Al-Fatiha, but reading a whole juz' of the Quran and sending it as a gift to Imam Al-Khwarizmi. Definitely, he created a revolution in the 9th century that the 21st century people are celebrating today. Without the algorithm that he founded, we won't have artificial intelligence. But the people he's part of, the people who claim him as their imam and their scientist, the people who are so proud of his accomplishment are ignorant today. I'm using this term on purpose, are ignorant today. Ignorant means they see knowledge, but they don't go to it. They know how to seek knowledge, but they're not seeking it. The Quran teaching them to have a critical thinking, but they're not using their brain to use critical thinking. Therefore, the results are what we see today around us. People praying 5 times a day, giving a little bit of money here and there, and then fasting and performing Hajj, and then claiming this is Islam. Well, how come your ancestors created a civilizational revolution on earth where you are nothing? You're not even capable of thinking freely. You're importing knowledge that we used to export to the world. And even that knowledge, you don't know how to use properly. You try to abuse it. So just to have, just to use the internet is fine, but most of us use it on social media and don't use it to learn. I mean, Google can be a tool of knowledge, but most of us use the social media just to gossip and to talk about this politician and that politician. We're in a sorry state of affairs. In order to move from that sorry state to a positive state, all we have to do is to properly listen to those 2 khutbahs, just 2 khutbahs, half an hour each, that Dr. Suhail Ghannouchi worked, prepared, and delivered. And I can vow that he didn't deliver with his lips, he delivered from the heart to all of us. And I kept looking around at the people while he's talking about those very important things, that simple but important, that he was talking about. And I didn't see enthusiasm. I hope I'm wrong. I wish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would prove me totally wrong. And I would see people from the masjid who heard those khutbahs urging him, demanding from him to talk more and give us more details and, you know, discuss more steps that they having problem with, that they need to conquer in order to move forward. And we're only talking here about things that are within the ability of every one of us to do. Enhancing your iman. Basically, he also told us how to enhance the iman. He said, try to learn the beautiful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Asma Allah al-Husna. Each one of these names represent a character that if we adopt will increase our iman. Am I correct saying this, Dr. Suhail?
Yes, that was one of the
Is
easy
it my
way.
correct understanding? Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the easy way because
Yes,
very
exactly.
effective, because the relationship with Allah is multidimensional.
Yes, and
And
if you are sitting in that mosque, looking at the wall and at the top, at the roof, you'll see all these beautiful names of Allah right there.
Yeah,
So,
and every name or group of names, they work on one dimension of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are names about mercy, names about forgiveness, names about power, etc. And then also I mentioned the study of the Quran.
yes.
Studying the Quran, not just reading or memorizing.
No. Studying, reflecting.
Studying the Quran is a very effective way to strengthen the relationship with Allah.
Yes. So, alhamdulillah, I mean, he didn't stand up and say, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim, then change the subject. No, he told us what that taghyir, what that change that Allah is demanding from each one of us requires. So basically, I'm very impressed with that. And I ask that we all go back, look for these two khutbahs and try to follow them. Basically, the end result should be for each one of us to feel that we are better human being doing this. When I exercise mercy, I am exercising a virtue, was a value. Then when I practice it, became a virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala urged his prophet to practice, and it's one of his character, his sifat. So what's wrong with us exercising mercy every day? Mercy toward the people we work with, the mercy at home between the husband and his wife, the husband and his children. We have an opportunity to be merciful every day. Inside the mosque, sometimes we see children, people bringing children with them, and we want to be tough, so we criticize those children that are in the mosque playing around instead of being merciful and give them a hug. Next to me was a father with two children. One of them was giving him a hard time. I signaled the boy and hugged him and helped him sit next to me so he would feel calm and respected. He's not alone. We are all his uncles inside the mosque. It's simple, but a form of mercy that we can exercise every day. So basically, to summarize everything we talked about today, we are not where we need to be or where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be. In order to be where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be, we need to find out what he wants from us. Dr. Suhail made that very obvious and clear. He told us Allah wants you to be the best you can be. And the best human being we can be are those people that are reading Asma Allah al-Husna and trying to take these meanings to heart and try to practice them and to live them. And those who read the Quran and try to get the knowledge from the Quran in order to understand Allah's message. Being the best you can be and be merciful to yourself and to others is, I think, the basic message. And it's a message that is doable. It's something that we can practice and we can compete in practicing among each other and encourage each other to practice all the time. Thank you very much.
Should we open the discussion or you have more to do? We have Dr. Bashir and Dr. Kazi, both of them. Anybody ready to?
I would like to hear from them if possible.
Yes, inshallah.
Well, if you'll allow me, I'd like to say a few things here.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khairan. It was a pleasure really listening to Dr. Ghannouchi and also to Dr. Kaskas here and their thoughts. I think those are very important thoughts that they talked about on the state of affairs that we are in and comparing that with the life of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I'd like to just add a few things here. Of course, I do agree with most of what you've said. Now, one of the things that came to my mind was that if we look at the seerah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we see the two phases, which is the first phase that was a Meccan period that you talked about, which is the 13 years, where his essence, his thrust was towards establishment of a state whereby Muslims could then lead their lives according to certain rules. And so you're absolutely right that during the Meccan period, his entire thrust was on Tawheed. It was a mission. It was trying to bring about that position where Muslims could then have that state, which they acquired in the latter part of his life, which was during the Medina period. Now, the other important aspect is that throughout his life, even during the Medina period, while the Medina period was a state where people could practice their rituals, they could practice their social and political life in a more stable fashion, yet the actual stability does not come until after his death. It's a struggle, and you very rightly pointed out that it is a struggle. And if we compare that with our lives today, we are in many ways similar to the Meccan period, where we do not have any power. We do not control or try to push towards the manner in which the destiny of the nations is controlled. So in that respect, yes, we are very much in the Meccan period. And how do you analyze that? How do you go about from that state into a state where you can have stability? So in other words, definitely there are these two states: the state of the instability, a state where you do not have power, where you are really struggling to get on top so that you can push towards others and say that, look, this is how we lead our lives. And that's why you see that throughout the times of the Khulafa Rashidin and also many other of the rulers that came later on, when they would address other nations, they'd say that, look, either you accept our way, Islam, or we will have to do certain things in order to have control over you and the control over the destinies of others, not for the sake of ourselves, but so that mankind at large can have a situation where they lead their lives according to the rules that have been dictated to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the mithaq. The mithaq which was given to every nation prior to Rasulullah and also given to us. And unless you are able to lead your lives according to that, then it does not matter. Therefore, many of us, you rightly pointed out, we are in a state where we think that we are in a stable state, although we are the underdogs, unfortunately. Now, having said that, there's a very interesting, you talked about the 3 or 4 different categories of Muslims, and it reminded me, this is like around 50 years back when I was a student back then at MIT, when I was reading a book of Dr. Wahiduddin Khan, And it was a very interesting comparison that he gave. And he has his 4 categories, and they're not, I mean, they're in many ways, they match with yours. And I think that probably we could expand and maybe have even more categories. And he also talks about 4 categories. The first being the traditional Muslim, which is, you rightly pointed out, these are Muslims who are born Muslims and who are ritualistic, who just think that by doing certain things, that's exactly how you lead your life. And the vast majority of Muslims today fall into that category, who you may call as traditional Muslims or born Muslims, or how you want to classify them. Now, there's one category that he talks about, which is in addition to the categories that you mentioned, and that is what he calls as the modernist Muslim. And the modernist Muslim is that person who, in many ways, he is a born Muslim, and he's struggling to try to justify his existence as a Muslim in light of all that has happened and the way the West has been able to impose our thought processes. And therefore, he is going to try to say that, well, you know, I can probably do pick and choose. This part I can take from Islam, and yet my rational being says that I could probably modify certain things. And therefore, we find a very strong segment of our educated masses and those who have been exposed extensively to the Western civilization may be fallen into this category. And such people thus are very, a great, how should I say, they can get very easily themselves or the next generations out of Islam. And in particular in North America, we see that a very significant segment of Muslims are either Muslims by name or they have even left Islam. And this is true in the West. And it's happening in Muslim countries as well, where we see this culture, this atheistic or agnostic culture that has invaded us. And we find people, they're very materialistic. They do not see into the akhirah at all. Now, the third category you very rightly pointed out is the legalistic Muslim. The legalistic Muslim is not only the common man that is talking only about halal and haram, and they talk about the masala. What's the masala? How do you solve this question? And whether I should do this or I shouldn't do this? What are the hudud? And even within the hudud, if you look at what is the mubah area and what is the mustahab or what is makruh, and they're stuck within this realm. But more so, they're into the ritual part of it and very strict about it. And the fiqh that has developed, as Brother Hamid talked about earlier as well, even the Hanafi fiqh, which used to be probably the most liberal in the approach, using certain techniques. We can talk about that later on, but even they have really been encroached upon and have become extremely rigid, just like as Brother Ghanouchi pointed out. We talk about the Salafis, we talk about anybody else, they are very much stuck into that realm. But more so than that, what that analysis talks about is another segment who he also places within this legalistic Muslims. And these are our ulama of today. The vast majority of our ulama are the ones that promote this culture, promote this thought process. And because they are supposedly the ulama, or they are the leaders in the masajid, who are the ones who deliver the khutbah, even if they do not have the real knowledge of the Quran and the Hadith, but because they are, and particularly I say this in the subcontinent, where the people who lead the salah in the masajid on Jum'ah, their khutbahs are really things that you wouldn't want to listen to. And the thought process that they propagate is really so detrimental to our thought process that it's amazing. And it brings us back, it drags us back into that state of affairs of that mental slavery. And it is this group that then pervades particularly the first group, the traditionalist Muslim, that they think that this alim, whatever he says, is it. And that is the interpretation that I need to follow, and I need to be ritualistic, or just I talk about these masail. And many of these lectures, etc., that we listen to from probably some very learned people, they are just concerned about only that aspect. Is this halal? Is this haram? How do you perform things in that respect? And the last category that he talks about is a very interesting one. And in many ways, well, I think Dr. Ghannouchi, what he talked about the activism, about the dawah process, and actually trying to bring about a change is an add-on. But before we go to that add-on, I think it is that mental state and how you actually implement yourselves. And I think that most of us probably know this very famous ayah from the Quran, which is in Surah Al-Baqarah. And I won't read the entire ayah, but I think you all know the one I'm talking about. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْكِتَابِ النَّبِيِّينَ, etc., etc. The entire ayah, it's a long ayah, but I think it's that ayah which sets the actual pace, where it talks about that the bir, al-bir and taqwa is not the ritualism. It is not your facing of your faces towards the mashriq or maghrib, but it gives a whole long list of things that need to be implemented in your lives. Now, this again is talking in a stable state. Now, you were talked about, well, we are in an unstable state. We are in a state where it needs to bring about change. But when you're in a stable state, in addition to that iman, the iman in the 6 main elements, it talks about very much about where you spend your wealth. How do you spend your wealth? Where do you take your wealth and make sure that makes a difference? It also talks about where you honor your contracts. It talks about the sabr, الصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس. Now, these are certain elements which we don't talk about. Nobody wants to talk about these elements. They just want to talk about the rituals. But when you come back to the essence of it, as to what that al-bir wa taqwa is supposed to be, it incorporates all of these things. And it's very interesting the way Dr. Ghannouchi put it, that if you go a step backwards to that state of instability, as I say, where we are in that state, this Meccan state, where how do you really move from this state to the state of Medina? And there are various groups that I know that have come about, and I have studied them, alhamdulillah, in many ways. And you see a difference between these movements we see in the Muslim world, whether it's the thought process of the Ikhwan or the Jamaat Islami of Pakistan, or it is the Hizb ut-Tahrir, who have a more radical way of looking at the entire process. And I'm assuming that you are all aware of these, so I don't want to take too much of my time to go over their thought process and their method of how to move from the state we are in today, this post-colonialist, or rather neo-colonialist period that we live in today, where we are struggling to find that method where we are at least as equals with anybody else, where we can come back into a state that we lead a life according to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and are able to achieve a just society, a society that brings about a lifestyle that is in accordance. Now, of course, not everybody is going to be at the same state of mind, but when you have a state with a certain set of rules, it's true with any state, whether it's Muslim or non-Muslim, where you have certain laws in place, and the laws are implemented both from within our hearts, which is the ihsan, and also implementing the laws, then you bring about that stability. Like we see that stability in the West, we don't have that stability in our countries, in the Muslim countries, because of that problem that we are in. Can we get to that stage, and how do we get to that stage? I'm not going to answer that question today, but I thought I'd share some of my thoughts. I'm sorry it took a little longer in trying to elaborate on all of these points, but I want to really thank Dr. Ghannouchi and Dr. Kaskas for sharing their thoughts. And of course, it invigorates our minds, and these need to be invigorated and probably also transmit this to others who can bring about that change. And what that change is, of course, we all need to discuss that in more detail. Thank you very much. And sorry for taking so much time to say these things.
Jazakallah khair. Dr. Suhail, you want to continue or, comment, or we should listen to Dr. Bashir first?
Just quickly on the verse that Dr. Qazi mentioned, Jazakallah khair. Interestingly, in that verse and in other verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the action or the mission sometimes and in number of verses before the rituals, before even salah. And we know that Quran, every word is in place for a reason, and there is wisdom behind it. It's not like haphazard. So after the iman came وَآتَ الْمَالَ. They do things that benefit others and benefit the societies, as Dr. Safi was mentioned, greater good. And آتَ الْمَالَ على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب. You can put a lot of things under آتَ المال, because giving money, giving your time, sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise, anything that is beneficial. It starts with the money because that's the most beloved things to people. That's, and the verse says وعلى حبه. But it's amazing that after iman came action that benefit people, and then وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة. And then came also the character, the personal character. والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين. Even in that, الوفاء بالعهد, which has to do with people, came before sabr, which is something that is for between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can see this in other verses. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. This time came even before iman. أمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر came even before iman, when it says that you are the best community sent to humanity. It's not like this is more important than the iman. My reading to it was, if iman does not produce this, then there is a problem with it. So it starts with the product, that the product is amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy an munkar. The process is iman. Ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna an munkar wa tu'minuna billah. And then in another verse says, wal mu'minuna wal mu'minatu in Surah Tawbah, بعضهم أولياء بعض, believer man and woman, they are allies of one another, they come together. يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويطيعون الله ورسوله. Again, this amr بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر came before the thing that is between you and Allah. So that's that we should reflect on those verses, that every word in Quran is in place for a reason. So when Allah puts something before something else, that's to highlight the importance of it. So we can see it in the verse of Surah Al-Baqarah and in these verses, how that the first thing that is required, that when you dedicate yourself to Allah, Allah wants you to dedicate your efforts to the people, to make this world a better place and to help people around you becoming better people. That's your mission. And of course, while working on yourself to be a better person. That's the essence of our deen. The essence of our deen came to make the people better people and to make this world a better place for everybody. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the honor and the responsibility to do that job, even though He doesn't need our efforts. But He gave us that noble task to be the one who execute His plan, understand and execute His plan, and understand and fulfill His purpose. I want to hear Dr. Bashir.
Dr. Bashir, can you hear us? Please, if you want to
Okay.
comment or.
Thank you very much for a great opportunity to listen. And I agree everything Dr. Gunuchi and Dr. Kaskas mentioned. Just to repeat a couple of things, he said so beautifully that during the first few years in Islam, Prophet did not concentrate on rituals, but he talked about his mission, Islam, so that people will not just passively practice, but understand the dynamism of this new religion and what responsibilities this new religion is giving. And in my limited studies, the Quran is the one who inspired and stimulated people to come out of Jahiliyyah. And during the early period of Islam, we produced so many scientists, not hundreds, but thousands of them, who had a mission to bring a change in this world for the betterment. And Dr. Safi mentioned so well about Khwarizmi, how his work has resulted in today's computer science, algorithms, and artificial intelligence. And if I give one example, Zaharoui, who was a great surgeon in Spain during his practicing time, like 30, 40 years, he invented more surgical instruments, devised more surgical interventions than the Muslim world has done in last 1,000 years. He did it in 40 years. What kind of a dynamism they have? What kind of an environment they have? So without going into too detail, I want to mention two brief things. One thing is that humans have a tendency to have an easy way out. That's the nature, one of the nature. Why it was easier for Christianity to spread? Because they said, we all commit sin, but Jesus died for our sin, so you don't have to worry. If you believe in him, you will be saved, salvation. I think we are going in the same direction. I don't hear the lectures, what Dr. Sohail beautifully did, and I want to listen also. I'm waiting for that link. What I hear more is, this life is very short. You have to prepare yourself for afterlife.
Yes.
But God has mentioned dunya and akhirat both. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasnatan wa fil akhirati hasnatan. What that fid dunya hasnatan mean? I try to look at that, and in various translations, it talk about human services, what you're doing for people in the world today. So it gives equal importance. But then where does change occur? I think that Dr. Sohail mentioned very well. It started after the Khulafai Rashidin, because in the interest of the Umayyad dynasty to promote the predestination, it's all decided by God. You are not doing much. Everything is done already. It is recorded in Lawh Mahfuz. So where our responsibility? When the God said we will be rewarded for your work, how can we say, if he has already decided, how he will divide? So these are the questions we bother. But I want to concentrate one last thing. That is the dichotomy of dunya and akhirat. First of all, in most of the masajid, we talk about concentrate on your life after death, because that's eternal. Now, this is not. Second thing they talk about, that the rituals is making it easy for you to go to Jannah. Second thing is, even that is make it much easier by quoting several ahadiths. For example, reading Quran even without understanding is sawab. I don't know what that means. How can you read a book and you don't understand? What is the point in reading the book? But we are told that reading the book itself is sawab, so just read it all the time. Okay, number one. Second thing is, even that make it easier. If you read Surah Ikhlas 3 times at night, it is equal to finishing the Quran. Again, it is beyond my understanding. But that's how our population, Muslim populations, are told in our Friday khutbahs. Second thing is, I also heard if you pray 5 times a day in a masjid for 7 days, it is equal to performing a Hajj. I don't know who calculated this and how this come to conclusion. But the message I am giving is that we are making is not only rituals, but making even easier that if you do certain things, it will get great benefits. And that's the same thing saying that if you believe in Jesus, you're solved. You're going to. So how we bring the change? How we bring the change? Because a lot of people who think clearly, they don't have the microphone, they don't have the congregation, and they cannot stand up if somebody giving the khutbah said, but look, I don't understand this. I heard that when Prophet was talking in the Masjid al-Nabawi, even women asked him the question. Now, women, of course, totally segregated, but even the men cannot ask any question. So I'm sorry, I am asking more questions than answering, but I am hoping that with this group and with this learned speakers, I will learn how to bring the change. Thank you very much.
Sahel, you wanna comment?
Jazakumullah khair. I mean, it's all really everybody's whatever was said is shedding the light on one aspect of this great religion that we are trying to rediscover, and that was largely lost, unfortunately, over the centuries. Unfortunately, when this beautiful paradigm collapsed, everybody took bits and pieces and made their own understanding of Islam. And that's why we have those shallow and superficial understanding and that focus only on one aspect. You have groups that focus on the spiritual and neglect everything else. For groups focus on the political at the expense of other things, and etc. And the ritualistic and the fiqh. And so it is long overdue that we try to be open and frank and confront the brutal facts and the brutal reality that no amount of patchwork can fix what we have. It's beyond repair. It's a damage that happened over centuries. It's a damage that affected the Muslim mind, the Muslim personality, the Muslim society, etc. And then when proof is when we brought Muslims back to that superficial and shallow understanding of Islam, there was no change in the society. And that's something that I keep raising all the time. It should puzzle everybody, and we should really reflect on it, because we have seen in the last, since the 60s and 70s, and in some countries since the 1930s, we have seen people coming back in large number to Islam, but to that version of Islam. They become practicing. Mosques are full. Hijab is everywhere. And then we have all these schools and universities producing scholars. And then we have lots of literatures. It starts with books, and then with those cassettes, and then with videotapes, and then with CDs, and then with websites, and then with the satellite channels, and then with social media sites, etc. And nothing happened. These societies, they're still backward, they are still stagnant, and even in terms of character, things did not improve. Don't tell me, I mean, it's very sad that people say that people's manners and character used to be better in the 60s and 70s and 80s than now. It's very sad because not only the wave of people coming back to Islam did not improve the character, it actually the character of people even worsened. So it is about time to accept that we need to rediscover the original true Islam, the inspiring, empowering Islam with its great flexibility, with its with its great balance, because that original Islam is like a piece of art. Yeah, if it is modified or twisted, it will lose. It's a very delicate balance between the spiritual, the morals, the civic, the personal, the sense of beauty, the science. It's a very delicate balance between that produces that coherent and holistic person, very balanced personality. We lost that. That's why now we are producing people who are really totally out of balance. Just one thought about the science, why we had so many scientists and why people excelled in science at the early days of Islam. It was because of that proper understanding. When you understand Islam as a mission, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned you the job to manage and develop earth, that will push you to learn the rules that Allah has embedded in this universe. And that's what science is all about. This science does not create things. Science discovers the rules that Allah has already embedded in the universe. Gravity is a rule of Allah that He has embedded in the universe. It's your job to discover it and leverage it to make life better. And that's what other people are doing, and we stopped doing for a long time now. But the early Muslim, they understood that their job is to understand the deen and understand the world, understand the universe, and then leverage it to fulfill the purpose of Allah. Because Allah not only wants us to be the best we can be, but Allah also wants us to be the happiest we can be, the most successful we can be, and wants prosperity. Allah subhanahu, it's not true. This idea that Islam promotes poverty and the Prophet died poor and it's okay to be poor and to fail in this life because you need to focus on the hereafter. That's not true. Allah will not be pleased with Muslims if they're not at the forefront in this world, leading civilizations, because that's what they were designed to be. خير أمة and أمة وسطا لتكونوا شهداء على الناس. You lead. And this verse that was mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah and in Surah Al-Hajj, لتكونوا شهداء على الناس ويكون الرسول عليكم شهيدا عليكم. That your role among nations should be the same as the role of the Prophet amongst you. The role of Muslim individuals and communities in this world should be the same as the role of the Prophet among Muslims. And what was the role of the Prophet among Muslims? Role model and leader. So you are expected to be role model and leaders.
Yes.
And the Prophet was sent to be mercy to humanity. You are supposed to be mercy to humanity. And if you think about it nowadays, we are not really contributing almost anything. And that's why in the early days of Islam, people did not even see the difference between religious knowledge and scientific knowledge. And you find the same person who is in the morning in his lab discovering the rules of Allah, and in the afternoon teaching Islam in the mosque. There are a lot of scientists, they were also scholars at the same time.
Yeah.
Why? Because they saw it's one of the same. Understanding deen and understanding this world is your job. So because you cannot fulfill the mission of Islam without understanding the deen and also understanding the world. And I say that we shouldn't even say that Islam is compatible with science. Actually, the goal of science is the same as the goal of Islam. We teach people in the university that the goal of science is to upgrade and improve the quality of life, to make people in this world more prosperous and live better life. But that's exactly the goal of Islam. I mean, the goal of science. So when we say that they're compatible, actually we're not doing justice to Islam. It's not Islam is compatible with science. Islam has the same goal with science. That's why Quran is full of verses encourages and praises those who reflect and contemplate, because both lead to the same goal. The more you know Allah, the more you know your deen, the better you are, and the more you contribute to the greater good. You're more motivated to do. And the more you learn about the rules in the universe, the better job you will do in being a Khalifa of Allah, manager or deputy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. It's very sad that nowadays, when you see the statistics of how much Muslims read, and when you see the statistics of how much Muslim countries are contributing to science and research, it's very embarrassing. In one of those statistics, in the average Muslim countries, individual reads about quarter a page per year. In the United States, it's 11 books. The average, 11 books. Now, look at what is the ranking of university in the Muslim world in the global ranking of universities, and look at how much we are contributing. I mean, when the COVID came, nobody looked at the Muslim world waiting for any solution from that. Nobody, because it was not expected to come from that. You know, we were among those who are waiting for the solution to come from somewhere else.
Just one sentence I'd like to mention in response. My understanding is that Quran mentioned takaffur more than aqimus salata wa atuz zakat. And what is takaffur is fikr. Fikr is critical thinking. Critical thinking is what science is. So I hope that's what we need to promote. Thank you very much. I appreciate.
Great.
Assalamu alaikum. If I can ask this question, how you can make your message, the people look for it. I born in Damascus. We have Christian friends. We were kids. They love to go to the church. They push their families, their parents to go to the church. We never did that to push our parents to go to the masjid. He talked about it, Dr. Bashir, I think, about their message wrong. I know the message of the church is wrong, but it's attractive for the kids to go to the church. We need to make your message, what you are talking about, attractive, at least to the kids. I know your message right now is not attractive to the adult, but why it's not attractive to the kids? Please, if you can answer.
We need some chocolate in the masjid. But should we take the other question from Nidal? He has a question, if anybody can read it in the chat. Dr. Safi, go ahead if you want.
Well, actually, I read the question from Nidal. We are all dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we all need his help. Without his help, we're nothing. This whole universe is dependent on not just us, dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't know how to specifically translate the word ayal, except it can be children or dependent, but probably dependent is better. To stick to orthodoxy, dependent is much better. But I want to comment on something important we spoke about previously. We have a number of thinkers in this area and around the United States. We talked about presenting a new understanding because the old one is not working. And I personally usually get a whole lot more and there's better understanding when I'm talking and discussing ideas with other people rather than reflecting by myself. Because of this, we talked about a movement that will bring Muslims together so they can discuss, find direction, define their mission and turn into active Muslims. Muslim with a mission that can live by that mission. So I think it is high time, like I said last time, that we launch a movement like this. And I urge Dr. Suhail in his Friday sermons to write toward that end. Right? To, first of all, simplify the message. There is no sense in complicating anything. Stick to the Sunnah of Prophet ﷺ of making everything easy when you explain it to Muslims. And then have your khutbahs directed toward completing the understanding and urging Musallin to come to discuss. Because among the people who are sitting there at the mosque, I am sure some of them have something to say. Maybe we're missing, we need to hear. Maybe that will help us enhance our own understanding of what this new format, new formula of Islam should be about. So we need, the more we encourage people to talk, the more we discuss, the better we are. Like today, I learned a lot from Dr. Siddiqui. I don't necessarily agree with his vision of Islamic history, but that's okay. We're talking about how to live today. The Muslims that lived before us, تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم. Those people are already dead. They already accomplished whatever they want to accomplish. How are we going to be people with an opinion that counts, with knowledge that can benefit other people? How can Islam change us internally and externally? This can be done only through a movement. You cannot do it on your own. This is the purpose. I propose that we discuss the items that Dr. Suhail talked about in his last khutbah. Why should I go and invent the wheel if it's already there? We need to build on each other ideas and promote them and talk about them to other people. This is important. I think this meeting every Sunday, instead of introducing new earth-shaking ideas, to build on the simple we have so it can become something substantial. Thank you.
Inshallah, that's the intention. Inshallah, we'll try to find both people who are willing to sponsor this message and people who are willing to be part of packaging it, crafting it,
Yes.
and then promoting it
Yes.
to try to build a movement around it, because that's the only way, and there is no alternative to this. Just for the question of Brother Abu Abdullah, is making the message attractive it's part of this rediscovery of because the original message is very attractive. If we find that original Islam is very attractive, very inspiring, very empowering, but what we are telling our children is another version of Islam that is not attractive at all. And many people heard this from me, that they say, why young people are not coming to the masjid? I always say, when I walk into the masjid and I find a young person, I say, how this person came? Because there is nothing attractive. I mean, we don't address their issues. We don't answer their questions. We are talking about something that is not relevant to them. So that's why it's not really inspiring and empowering. And that's why young Muslims nowadays, not only in America, but even in Muslim countries, are deserting Islam altogether. They're either falling for radical Islam, or they are deserting Islam altogether. So all what we need is to rediscover that original message and deliver it in a very compassionate way. Let's stop telling our children that you need to pray, otherwise Allah will throw you in hellfire, because that's not attractive. And that's, if it works, it will make them do the minimum just to avoid punishment. And let's start making them know Allah and love Him and worship Allah out of love and gratitude. And that's where the Christians succeeded tremendously. They made people love God, not fear. Of course, there is some deviation. They went to extreme, whatever, but in that respect, it's much more successful. Our children do not know Allah, and they only fear His punishment. And therefore, that's how what comes to their mind when they hear word Allah. It's just you need to avoid his punishment, but not knowing him enough so that to love him. So we need to find it, rediscover it, and present it. And believe me, our children will be very proud of it, because they will find it very inspiring, very empowering, motivate them to excel in life, motivate them to understand this world and to be successful and happy, so that their personal ambition will be in line with the religious motivation, with the civic, with patriotism, with compassion. All the engines of motivations will become synchronized and work together, because right now there is a tension between the two. There is a tension between being good Muslim and good citizen, and between Islamic religious commitment and patriotism. We created that tension artificially, because the original Islam make all of these very consistent, very synchronized, and converged to make someone who has great aspiration, no limits to their ambition. And remember, when you find a Bedouin, an Arab Bedouin, standing before the king of Persia at that time and saying that God has sent us to save humanity, you can see what kind of dream and mission that the Prophet has installed and instilled in these people. They see themselves that they have that big mission of making this world better place and having justice to prevail, etc. So that's what we need to rediscover and present it as is. Islam does not need to be beautified, or it's very beautiful, attractive, and inspiring as is. But it is that mutilation that we cause to Islam that is causing it now to be totally unattractive. And if someone accepts this version of Islam, it will be one of those categories. It will be something on the side that does not transform that individual, does not empower that individual, but it is something that they will do just to avoid punishment in the hereafter.
Jazakumullah khair. Any additional comments from anybody? Any questions?
جزاكم الله كل خير. جزاك دكتور قصقص, دكتور بشير, دكتور Kazi, دكتور Suhail, and brother Muhammad. And see you everybody next Sunday, inshallah, at noon.
Before we leave, the minimum responsibility that each one of us has is, if you see this useful and beneficial, is to try to invite those around you. It's not like we want to increase the number, we just want to maximize the benefit. So if you see this beneficial, it is not luxury or optional, it's become your responsibility at least to tell people and let them decide whether to come or not. And if they come, whether they like it and stay, or they don't like it, that's up to them.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum
Jazakumullah khair, everybody. Inshallah, we'll see you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair.